Hey everyone, it's Adam Farkas. Welcome to another ODwire webinar, and we're having a little break from tradition here tonight. We are not doing a clinical show. Yay. We're doing practice management tonight, and it's all about maximizing your insurance reimbursements, which is an important topic to everyone. So that's why I think this lecture has such broad appeal. We had several hundred people register for this one tonight, and I think it's just because no matter who you are, this is an important subject these days. Before we get started and I jump in and introduce the speaker, just a reminder, if you have questions during the show tonight, there's a little box on the right side of your screen that says questions. Pop it open, and you'll see a spot where you can type in a question, and you can send that, and it'll go to me. And what I'll do is I'll hold your question aside until the end, and then we'll just have a little verbal back and forth of Q&A. And don't be bashful. Feel free to ask questions if you want. You know, I usually don't mention who the person is asking the question, so do not be embarrassed. Just fire it on out there. And I know everyone's curious about the watch raffle as well. I'm going to be doing that after the event tonight, so what we'll do is I'll announce it on ODwire, and I'll also shoot you an email if you won. So with that said, why don't we just dive right into it? So tonight's speaker is someone who I think we've all turned out to see. It's Shane Shepard from VisionWeb, and Shane is deeply experienced in the ways of insurance. In fact, I'm trying to think if I know of anyone else who knows more of the ins and outs of actually getting reimbursed and doing it properly so you don't run into trouble. And tonight he's here to give us as many tips as he can cram into this hour-long session. So Shane, thanks so much for being here tonight.
Oh, thank you, Adam. I appreciate it. What a nice introduction. Very nice of you. Hello, everyone. It's nice to be with you tonight. Thank you for having me. It's an honor. And I always enjoy a good discussion about the business of optometry. So let's make it happen. There we go. First technical difficulty. All right, there's my ugly mug. You can see me. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. After graduating from college, I went to work at a health insurance company. Was blessed to be able to work, in the company and really I got to be the assistant to a vice president at an early age to a policy administration at this company. And so I got to see the inner workings of this insurance company. Everything from the mailroom to underwriting, claims department, and everything in between. And then from there, I ended up working at some healthcare providers, orthopedic surgeons, laboratories. And about 15 years ago, I landed in an optometry practice. And I managed it for 11 of those years. And, I just came to know that there was a pretty profound lack of knowledge about medical insurance in optometry. I knew nothing about optometry, but then, I found that there was a need there. So, put some things in place at this practice that I managed, and revenue was able to go up. And just from him performing his normal services, not trying to do anything he shouldn't do, just having information in his hands. So that's where the business started. VisionWeb ended up acquiring it and me. And so that's a little bit of my history. All right. So how do you find your denials? We're going to talk about denials and benefits tonight. They kind of go hand in hand. And so, but first we're going to talk about denials. You can get your remits either in an EOB form or an ERA. And all an ERA is an electronic EOB. And so it's just payment details. That's really, why don't they just call it that? It's payment details. And so, when you're looking at that information, the denials are contained on these documents. The reason for the denial, an explanation, and of course all the actual payment information. So if you're getting them in an EOB, it's a piece of paper, right? It's hard to aggregate that data and make decisions and see the bigger picture when everything's so anecdotal. An ERA is electronic, so it allows for you to be able to manipulate that data and understand things instead of just coming at it from kind of in the weeds. And so that's really why you would want to change your remits over to an ERA, especially if you have a PM system that allows for auto posting. And if you don't know about auto posting, it feels like magic the first time you do it. You can, just like you would export a file out of your PM system to file a claim, you can import the payment data into your PM system and post the payments and take the data entry out of posting payments. So, you know, I guess to find a denial, you have to really know what a denial is. And that seems like an easy enough question, but there is a distinction. So there are denials and rejections. Many people use those words synonymously, and you know, that aren't, you know, do that for a living, do this for a living. But there's an important distinction. So denials are claims that did process. You sent them in, and something about whether the diagnosis code didn't drive that particular test, or you had mutually exclusive tests on there, whatever the case may be, it did process at the insurance company, and they considered it for payment. It just didn't produce a payment. The rejection, on the other hand, is a claim that never got in the front door, so to speak. It got stopped prior to being processed. And so it's an important distinction we're going to talk about in a little while, why. But the rejection was never processed. That's the piece of that I want you to remember, okay, as opposed to the denial. So, yeah, okay. So the biggest denial by far are duplicate denials. When I look at any individual practice, or you know, I'll look at some companies from a bird's eye view of many practices, and by far the most common denial is a duplicate denial. And so if you're familiar with looking at your remits, that'll be on there as OA18. It's adjustment code O18. When you're looking at one of your remits, it's not rocket science. There's a little code there. Tells you, you know, you'll see MA16, OA18. You'll see little codes, and then there's a legend underneath it with a description of what it is. So when you see OA18, that's a duplicate claim. So why does it happen? You know, duplicates, they have the exact same information, okay? Let's go by that. They have the same demographic information, same provider information, the data service, everything is the same as the previously submitted claim. So, you know, it stopped really prior to being reconsidered. And so why does it happen? You know, the ODs, I know that, you know, they're hardworking, they're trying to get everything done, you know, and it's really, this is a symptom of a hardworking, caring up, you know, optometrist. But they will go and look at their accounts receivable and see that there is a big pile of money there waiting to get collected. And so they go, well, these claims must have never been submitted. And they will, you know, put them back into the queue going, well, I'll just file them again. You know, what can it hurt? And it really doesn't hurt anything other than it doesn't produce, you know, the duplicates are not going to pay. You know, now if you had a few claims in there that somehow slipped through the process and didn't get filed to begin with, those will process. Okay, so I'm going to say there's zero value in that, but it creates a lot of administrative work to deal with all of these duplicate denials, and it's not accomplishing what the big picture and getting those claims looked at. So don't just dump the claims into the queue or just randomly file them and expect it to process. What you have to do is file a corrected claim, and corrected claims, you know, you're going to refer to the ICN or CCN number, claim control number, or internal control number that's found on a remit, and it you know, that's the identification for that processed claim. So the first time they issue a number, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then when you go to file the next claim, you know, it didn't pay. You're not, you know, you're not sure what's going on with it. You look, you investigate it, you find out what's wrong, you fix it. Maybe it's a pointer, your diagnosis code or something, and then you file it again. You have to put a reference to the previously processed claim for it to be considered. And so the, you know, the number on that is the CCN or ICN number. That's what they're labeled as. It's a big, huge, long string of numbers. And then there's a particular place on a claim form. If you're using a clearinghouse, you can do so electronically, depending on the clearinghouse. Some will make you pay extra to kind of nickel and dime you, in my opinion. for that functionality. That is really should be part of every clearinghouse, in my opinion. But the yes, you can correct claims electronically. A lot of people think you got to drop them to paper, and you don't have to do that these days. The next biggest denial is payer does not cover this service, and so you can look at it and it says it's not a covered service, and this really comes from not understanding the policy language, and really it's the benefits. If you didn't check your benefits, this isn't that the patient doesn't have coverage. This is that the coverage doesn't cover this service. The reason why this is the second largest denial is because this has to do with routine vision benefits. And you definitely want to take in your medical insurance and check those benefits for when there's a routine service available. But if you just accept it out of hand and don't check your benefits, a number of them do not have that preventative service on there. And so that's normally what we get these for, refractions for policies that never had that service to begin with. So how do you fix them? You check your benefits. That's a reoccurring thing through this, is that checking your benefits and investing in that process early on makes the business run so much better and prevents all kinds of issues. Late filing denials. Okay, so that's the third largest one. Every carrier, every insurance company has got a deadline on how long it takes from the date of service till they get accept a claim for processing. And it really is a huge difference depending on the insurance company. Some are, a year, which is that's great. And then others are 90 days. And so it's important to know what those are for the different insurance companies that you do business with. It's going to be in your contract when you sign that contract. I know who's reading those contracts, right? But there's so much, they're an inch thick, but in that contract is going to be the terms of the agreement, and so it's going to tell you in that what the deadline is. Of course, you don't have that document in your files. It's gone with when. You can call the insurance company and they'll tell you. Of course, they'll tell you that. So, but it's so important, especially you're working your accounts receivables. When you're going to work your aging, if you've got one insurance company that's 90 days and another one that's 365 days, you need to look at different claims on those two. You want to go catch the ones, when you first start working it, you want to go catch the ones that are close to the timely filing deadline so that you don't get that denial. So why does it happen? Mistakes happen every now and then. No one's perfect. No one bats 1,000. And so sometimes you're just going to miss a claim. And if you're not, on top of your accounts receivables and going through it with a fine-tooth comb, then you may miss some of these. There's a point of where it's a good business decision and bad business decision. It depends on how much you have to invest in someone to work that AR that way. But the point of it is, if you don't file these claims within these time frames, you're going to get that denial. Now, the reason why I asked you earlier to remember the difference between a rejection and a denial is that the denial was accepted for processing, right? It actually did process. So there's a record of it. There's a claim control number that identifies it. That claim was accepted. A rejected claim was never processed. There is no claim control number associated with it. And, take for example, let's say it was a can't identified patient as our insured. Well, just think about it. How could they process that claim? They don't know who it's for. So the rejections in the insurance company's mind were never filed. If you didn't go and work your rejections and they just sat there, then your claims are going to go timely. And so you submit it. It's the first time, you've submitted it twice, but it denies for timely filing. You could have swore one was before. Probably someone's not working their rejections like they're supposed to. And on these, you can go to individual payer sites and file your claims. But I would suggest to you, especially if you're progressive and astute enough to join an organization like this, that it makes all kinds of sense to get a clearinghouse. Get a solution that organizes that data, and that goes back to an EOB versus an ERA. You can organize that data. Bundled payment denials. Bundled payments, I put it in here because I labeled it a denial because to you and me it's a denial, right? You have an office visit and another service, and the office visit doesn't pay, and we think of it as a denial. In the insurance company's mind, they're paying for that service in the other code. It's bundled together. So this normally happens with surgical codes. And you can identify any surgical code by the first number in the code. So 68761, for example, I believe is Pontal plugs. So Pontal plugs are considered office surgery, believe it or not. And so office surgery, if it's a surgical code, then the office visit is bundled into that surgical code. So a lot of times office visits don't pay with Pontal plugs, or say a foreign body removal, anything that starts with a 6. And the office visit doesn't pay, think of it as a denial. It's really the payment is in the other code. So technically it's not a denial. Now, having said that, how do you fix it? Well, you want to go by the correct coding initiative, and by that, let me put that into English for everybody. A modifier will bypass this correct coding initiative when appropriate. When appropriate, okay? You don't want to stick it on every claim. But a 59 modifier is for a separate identifiable service. Excuse me. Excuse me. So it's so the CCIs, they contain this information about whether it's a column 1 or a column 2, but essentially it comes down to whether the office visit was a separately identifiable service. If it was separate and distinct from the removal itself, then it would be appropriate. And so you would use a 59 modifier in that example, I believe. There's a couple, there's 2 codes that are for that particular issue. One's used on testing and one's used on office visits. Uninsured patient denials. So, going back to that other one, patient can be identified as are insured. Doesn't always mean they don't have insurance coverage. It's usually due to bad info that was given at the front desk. Medicare is going to be the most common example of this. For some reason, for whatever reason, a lot of seniors don't think of Medicare as insurance. That's what I've found when working at a practice and then visiting others, is that, they'll go, well, do you have, the staff will say, well, I need your vision and your medical insurance. And they'll throw out the vision, whatever vision they happen to have, but profess not to have any medical insurance. They go, well, you got to tread carefully here because if they're 65 or not. But well, do you have Medicare? And I've noticed a lot of times that they're, oh yeah, well, I have Medicare. So I don't understand that distinction and perception of it, but that's what I've found. But so they'll give you a Medicare card, and maybe they've signed up for an HMO. And they're not, again, they're just not putting that all together. So that's the most common example of it, but there are others. If someone's got dual insurance through a loved one and they throw out the card, or throw out their spouse's card. So how do you fix all these things? Really, you're going to call for your benefits. Call or check online. Preferably check online. But when they come in for their appointment, you double check all the demographic data, and you want the name in your system to be the name on the insurance card, of course, not whatever they may go by something else, but you want the legal name. And check all their demographic information, and then check their benefits. If you're going to check their benefits, you're going to tell them name and date of birth, and then you would have found that out at that point. So yet another thing that checking benefits helps. You know, really all starts with your benefits. It's you know, garbage in, garbage out. It's cliche, but if you get good information, then you can, you know, make good decisions. So the benefits of pulling your benefits. I'm not talking about how you're pulling your benefits tonight, or you know, interpreting them, because that's a different discussion for another day, an important one, understanding them. But we're going to talk about why, because I find a surprising number of practices that will pull it as needed. You know, only for the most egregious cases when there's no choice, you're going to be pulling a foreign body or something, and we'll leave it to the, you know, we'll do that if we need it, thinking that it cuts down on labor, you know, or that labor is limited in most practices, and so we'll do it when we need it. But you know, it makes financial sense, and it's good business for you to pull it across the board. So let's talk about why you would pull it, and then maybe another time I can come back and talk to you about how to interpret it, how to pull it, and how to interpret it. Faster exams and visits. You know, if you've got, and to be clear, what I'm proposing here is that you pull your benefits prior to the exam being performed. Now, you can't do that every time, you know, especially if you've got a practice that has a lot of walk-in traffic. If you're in the mall, something like that, then this is going to be harder to do. But anything that's on your schedule, there's no reason for you not to pull your benefits ahead of time. And you know the staff has moments where they have free time. So they, you know, if nothing else, maximize that free time and pull the benefits prior to the patient coming in. Make sure that you get them at the appointment being scheduled, and then that you pull them prior to it. So if you pull it before they come in, they walk in the door, they're not sitting there while your staff fumbles around trying to get it. And so that's a better experience. When you need to run a test, you have the information to communicate to them, whether it's going to cover it or not. You have the information, and you can have the conversation with the patient. Whether, you know, it may be that they need to pay for it, but you know it's not ambiguous, and that's a lot. There's a big difference between someone disclosing that to you up front, and then, you know, not really understanding it and then getting a bill later. So, you know, if you do that, you're going to have fewer angry patients from not getting bills, and that will lead to higher retention. If, you know, you're writing good prescriptions and providing good health care, and they are also having their insurance maximized, and they aren't having any problems with it, they don't have a reason to leave. Why would they leave? You're hitting all the marks there. So yeah, it helps. It does help with patient retention. It distinguishes the practice. More thorough care. Now, some people find this part shocking, but I found that doctors are people. They're people too. And when they have information, it influences behavior. You know, a lot of people want to kind of speak to this point from an idealistic place where you're not subject to the frailties of being human. But I am of the philosophy that, you know, whether you like it or not, having information at your fingertips affects your behavior. And so no one's suggesting to do anything that you shouldn't do. Just do the things you can do. Just do the things you can do, not just, and as opposed to only the things that you have to do. So it just leads to more thorough care. Now, a nice fringe benefit of that is more discretionary income, I would say for you, but also for your patient. There are times when billing, say, a routine eye exam to medical insurance actually reduces the cost to the patient. I'll give you a quick example. There are, you say you pull somebody's benefits, and nothing's hard and fast, of course. You got to pull them every time and know the little nuances of them. You put them all together, and you got something. But I digress. You pull somebody's benefits, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and they have routine vision. They come in and they say with a $30 copay, and they have a Superior Vision policy that has a $10 copay. So they come in and they opt to have fundus photography performed and as part of the exam. And you notice some peripheral retinal degeneration. Now, that can be billed out as a medical procedure, of course. So, and depending on the instrument that you're using, like if it's an Optimap, you may have to go back to the instrument and perform it in a slightly different way so that it qualifies as a medical test versus a screening. This depends on your instrument on that one. But on the first scenario, let's say you're going through Superior Vision. You got a $10 copay, and the test is going to run the patient whatever your screening cost is. So let's say most people I think are around like 40 bucks at this point. So $50, say. And now let's flip that around and say that you build it, and you're going to get your exam fee plus the screening charge. So if your exam's, I don't know, let's say it's 100, and that would be low, for the codes. But let's say it's 100, and then you got your screening at 40. That's 140. Let's flip it around and bill it to medical insurance when there's routine on there. The exam, 92004 is going to reimburse around 150. It depends on your region of the country. And the refraction, assuming there is a refraction, that is what would make it have the routine. And that, say 20 bucks for that. And then fundus photography is going to pay somewhere between 60 and 70. So, you went from a $140 visit to, a $280, I think. I don't know. You can go back. I know you will go back and do the math here. But it's, you can almost double your income, and you're not doing anything different. You're performing the same services. You just recognized what you saw and documented it, and of course you went and run it properly, jump through the hoops and do all the things you're supposed to do, and don't push it. You're not inventing diagnosis codes, but when you identify one, it's legit, and you shouldn't have any kind of hang up about utilizing the patient's policy, which they are paying dearly for. How pulling benefits decreases admin expenses. Okay. So we're talking about the patient experience, but let's just talk about it internally. If you're pulling your benefits correctly and things aren't going to deductible at a higher rate than they should, or at least you've disclosed to the patient, those types of things. If you're not generating, it's not going to generate phone calls. Your phone's not going to be ringing as much, and so your staff can do other things like help the people that are in front of them. Fewer patient statements. That's literally a lower cost of goods, because you're not having to produce the statement, print, buy the ink cartridge, pay the staff to stuff the envelopes, postage, and that's if you're doing it yourself, and then, or if you're sending it through a service or something, there's going to be a fee for that. So, there's that cost savings there, and it is tangible. You know how much ink costs. Fewer resubmissions means lower labor. Yeah, I mean, that's what I got my degree in business, and they'll tell you in business school quality is less expensive to produce than something with low quality. Ultimately, initially it may be less expensive to produce a product with lower quality, but ultimately it's better to do it up front because you reduce these types of things. So, if you do this right, you're not having to resubmit claims and figure all that stuff out. No claims are going to go timely on you, and you're going to get paid so that you're going to have negligible. I admit it's small, but it's real. You'll have more interest in the bank, but first and foremost, you have your money in the bank. You can make payroll. That's kind of important. Reinvestment possible. Yeah. You start seeing that if you're pulling your benefits and you're doing these things, that the services that you render actually generate revenue and income, then yeah, you might be a little bit more apt to look at another instrument next time you go to a show. So it's not making the test pay for the instrument. It's just, again, that's just a normal human thought. If it's good for your patients and good for you, you reinvest. And then that's how, you look up one day and you've got a huge practice with all the toys that you could possibly want, and there's pride in that. So hassle-free encounters that don't come back to haunt the patient mean happier patients, happier staff, happier accountant, and happier you. And that's a win. I think that's not a win-win, that's a win-win-win-win. So there you go, guys. I appreciate it. I hope y'all got something out of this tonight. I don't know the answer to every question. No one does. But, and if they tell you they do, run the other way. But if you have questions tonight, I'd be happy to try to fill them for you.
Cool. Well, Shane, thank you so much. This was really fun, and now we're getting to the part of the show that I really love, the Q&A. If you're ready.
Yes.
Okay. So everybody, so you remember on the right side of your screen you have a question window right there. Feel free to start typing stuff, and we'll try to get in as many of these questions as we can. If we don't get to your question, again, this is going to be posted on ODwire later, and you can always post a comment there, and we can have a back and forth there. So first question that came in, this is an interesting one, and I don't know if you know the answer to this. So for the same code, the same insurance company, and the same practice, will an OD get the same reimbursement compared to an MD?
Yeah, it's not a, yeah, it can definitely be different. I've seen it, and it's not right. And every time I do see it, yeah, it's not a funny thing. I can say that. It speaks to the optometry versus ophthalmology, and really, what are you getting down to on this? Lobbyists, who've gone and fought, and because optometrists is performing the same service, and to pay them less because they're an optometrist, that's bogus. And it does happen, and depending on the state you live in, I'm not sure if this is, I don't believe it's universal. I think it's by state, but I know that some states forbid it. I'm not sure if it's just how far reaching that is. I'm not sure, guys. But yeah, you will. I have seen it before.
Yeah, and the unfortunate thing is you may not even realize that you're getting taken advantage of, right? Because if you're just an OD without an MD in your practice, you may never see anybody else's claims. You won't know that they're paying differently. So yeah,
that's exactly right, and that's how I came to be aware of it.
Yep.
Practices that have both, and then they questioned it within the practice.
Yep. Yep. All right. So interesting question here from my buddy Jeff. So the question is, when it comes to pulling the benefits, do you think it's efficient to pull them for every visit, or maybe just the first per year?
Okay, that's a good question. The last one was a good question. Great question, by the way. And this one as well. So, it depends. I personally, because there's usually enough downtime in between that you can maximize and check on it anyway. If you're being honest with yourself on those times, maybe you've got a practice that you're just completely from morning to night. But so I would say I personally checked it. I had it checked every time. I'll throw in a few scenarios that are really prone to this, that it would really matter, and that would be Medicaid, first and foremost. There's an argument to be made. That's a good question, and it's an argument to be made that you check it the first time, and depending on what you found out at that time, would you want to check it again? Like if there was a deductible remaining, you definitely wouldn't want to check it again, because the next time there may be no deductible. But assuming that there's coverage the first time, there's an argument to be made that you're okay to not check it again. But Medicaid, it's a month-to-month program essentially, and so they may qualify 1 month and then not the next, and or jump from one Medicaid, traditional Medicaid run by the state, to an HMO, and from HMO to HMO, scamming the system because there's no claims histories shared between the three. But so that's a possibility. I'm not saying they all do that, but they can jump around from different types, or they could lose it altogether. And so what I've seen are practices that have an inordinate high number of denials or rejections on the first of the month, for Medicaid policies because they checked it on the last day of the month, and then it changed when they came in. So I would say that definitely you want to check those Medicaids. But yeah, if you have the labor, I would check it.
Right. Interesting question here, a two-parter actually. So a lot of folks on ODwire outsource their billing functions these days because they just can't handle it anymore. Their heads explode just thinking about it. So they outsource it to another firm. The question is, do you recommend doing that? And if so, how would you actually select who to work with to handle your billing issues?
Yeah, well, whoever asked that, I love you. Thank you. My favorite person ever. Yeah, that's the business I started, when I was managing that practice. And when I first got there, I saw that, there was this lack of knowledge, and we were able to boost the income from, the first year it went from 600,000 to 900,000, and really just from informing the doctor. And I saw that there's this big need. If you're the practice that you have the right person, if you've gotten someone who is really, this is their life, and they're knee deep in it, and coding nerd kind of thing, then you may want to keep it in house. And when practice is just starting, especially then, if you've got somebody, because you're not going to have patience to fill the day up, But I run a revenue cycle management business in addition to a clearinghouse. So I'm in favor of them. Some of the benefits of outsourcing in general. You are paying an invoice rather than payroll. And if you pay payroll, you know that there are payroll taxes. And so, yeah, that's part of it. There's no payroll tax. You have some transparency. Even though it's outsourced, you have a little more transparency because generally there's one person in the office that does the insurance. If the normal size practice, if you've got somebody in house, then it's one person, and so you're subject to their schedule. If they get sick, if they acquire more and more skills and then leave you, then you're starting from scratch and you've had brain drain in the practice, and those are very frustrating things for people. So that when they invest time in an employee and then they get them nice and comfortable and they're finally hitting their stride and then they leave. So there are efficiencies that are obtained by going with an outsourcing company. You're always, if the company is run right, then you're not going to have these pauses in your payments. You're going to have a nice steady flow. And then the last part of it would be that you have transparency and reporting. You can, if you got a good RCM company, has good enough control of their data that they can turn it back around to you and just let you see it. There's no reason to hold that data from you, right? It's your data, it's your claim. So just make sure that the people that you work with, and there's some good companies out there. So, it has good control of the data. Submission of the claim is not that hard, okay? It's tracking the denials and rejections that will bury someone. And what happens a lot of times is businesses outgrow their infrastructure and they get buried by the denials. And so your initial submissions are okay, but then you start seeing these old claims not getting worked like they should. And so that's the kind of the thing to look out for. But yeah, I think it makes all kinds of financial sense to outsource. Absolutely.
Right.
But I'm biased.
Right. I got a good question here. So Felicia writes, any advice on billing medically necessary contact lenses to medical insurance? So she gives an example of being told a patient had coverage for keratoconic contact lenses, but the reimbursement was nowhere near cost, and they can't balance bill. So, this is a challenge. I think this billing medically necessary lenses to medical insurance. Any tips about that?
No, just good job recognizing the situation. Whoever's with you, give that person a pat on the back. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot with the medical insurance now. Vision insurances. I could give you some. Look for this, look for that. These different policies, VSP versus IMED, and that type of thing. But With the medical insurances, I've had nothing but trouble doing it. And while they may technically have the benefit, I think I believe you said a young lady, I think she hit it on the head, that there's a fee schedule, and you're obligated to, when you sign your contract with the insurance company, you're agreeing to perform those services for that rate. And so I don't really want to bill, I never wanted to bill fittings out either, because you're obligated to accept the contractual rate. They don't have different allowed amounts for 92310. If you submit 92310, it's gonna whatever the allowed amount is, the allowed amount. And so while that may be fine for a spherical patient, what about the keratoconus patient like that? So when you bill it and it hits that, you're obligated to follow it. And so the only advice I'd have for you is not to do it unless you're rock solid. I mean, just rock solid.
Right. So Felicia, I may have a little bit of advice. If you didn't participate in GPL EyeWire 2017, which is rapidly drawing to a close, it was our online conference about specialty lenses, which is still available till December 1st. One of the talks in there was a 2-hour-long one from John Rimpakis, all about specialty contact lenses and medical billing. And if you didn't go to the show, what I might try to do is I'll try to butter him up somehow, buy him a drink at the next conference or whatever, and see if I can actually get him to pull that lecture and put it up on ODwire so everyone can see it, because I think it is important for people to learn how to do this, because I think there's definitely an art to it. Obviously, if John had explained it for 2 hours, it can't be that easy. So I'll do my best to try to actually talk to him about that and get it out there.
Yeah, and Dr. Rumpakis would definitely know. He's a wealth of information himself. So when you get that, send it to me. So
let's see what else we got here. We have a million questions. Let me see if I can run. So when checking benefits, how are you able to know the discounts the insurance company will enforce when paying out the claim and sending it to the deductible?
Okay. So that'd be your fee schedule, really. And so your fee schedule, when you first sign your contract, and if you haven't gotten credentialed with everybody and you're still in that process, or there's somebody new coming up, then next time you get one of those, pay attention to the contract, because you think about it, it's you're agreeing to perform these services, for their people at this rate, and of course, so they have to disclose the rate to you. It's so you have every right to know the terms of your agreement with them. So from that standpoint, it should be available to you in the documentation. Now, the truth is, I know most people, where is that? Who knows? You kept it somewhere, but you can't find it now. And so then, you call the insurance company, and this is where they do try to obfuscate a little bit, and people have a little bit of a hard time getting it from them. You want to go to provider relations. Go to provider relations, not just the normal claims queue, and then just demand it. Another kind of backdooring into it. The old adage is, if you're getting everything you're billing, then you're not billing enough. So if you bill $100 and you get $100, then you're missing some money. It's above that. It's just a matter of how much. So.
Right. So question here, is it okay to have the patient pay up front and then just have them submit their own claim instead?
Yes, absolutely, you can do that. In fact, that's really the way the policies are designed. We just get, we, as a matter of course, do the necessary work to work around that. But the logic here is that the patient is paying the policy. It's their policy. And so the benefit is supposed to go to them. When you may have heard of accepting assignment, and that's what assignment is that the patient is assigning the benefit that ordinarily should go to them to you. And so if you just don't accept assignment, when you can file the claim for the patient as a courtesy if you wanted to do that, but collect up front, and yeah, absolutely, it's within your right to do that.
Right. Question here again about pulling benefits for new patients. So what's the easiest way for the staff to collect that information prior to their visit, or is there any sort of best practice that you've seen that people do?
Another good question. actionable item here. So yeah, there's a couple of things I would have to say about that. One is collecting the information to begin with. And depending on the staff, I've had some, they embrace it and it's not a big deal. And then others just, oh, they're never going to do it. They got their hang-ups. And so when they go to collect it, the patient can, prospective patient, they can kind of hear that uncertainty in their voice. And that is, it kind of snowballs from there. So, you want to make sure that the staff is, yes, definitely asking at the time the appointment is made and saying it with confidence. I just thank you for calling. Yes, this time is available. Now I need to get your vision and your medical insurance. And, it's just a normal thing. It is a normal thing. It should be a normal thing. So have confidence when they say it. May I have your insurance? That gets a different response. Now, when the patient does push back, the normal response that you hear, the answer is, you're coming to see the doctor. This is medical insurance. It's, you should pull it, and and there's an argument, and much more eloquent than that, but I think everybody understands where I'm going with that, to attack it from that way, and there's a tendency to want to defend the profession, and there's a little bit of a right there. But what I found is less confrontational and more effective is if you'll just simply, as just like you're having a conversation, tell them, there are times when pulling your medical insurance will decrease your expense, and so we try to maximize your insurance benefits the best we can, and be prepared for when there is, if and when there is something that needs to be run. You won't have to sit around. So if someone hears it's going to be quicker and may save them money, they usually do not argue with you. They're going to give it to you. So that's where I go with it first, and then if they don't go with that, then I'll go to the justification of it, and then just let it go. If they don't want to give it to you after that, just let it go.
Right. And let's see, so question here, how do you find out rules for billing in a PPO and an HMO? Is there a central place that you can look for this kind of information?
Well, it's, what you sign up for when you go get credentialed. You usually get like a little a sheet with the different plans that the insurance carrier provides, and you can opt out of the, it's kind of, a lot of people don't opt into the HMOs. They'll just do the PPOs. And so when you're credentialing, you can do it at that point. And then after that, you would, to do it, you call the payer. You're going to find those benefits, the differences on their site, or if you're pulling benefits through a clearinghouse, which I would suggest to you is a good idea. They're not always bad to take. I got to tell you, it's kind of like Medicaid. They have their things that you need to consider, but if you've got all those things worked out, it can be a good thing for the practice. Direct people to the practice, and at an HMO, for example, you can tell the PPOs from the HMOs by the structure of the policy number. If it's an Aetna policy and it's a PPO, it starts with a W. If it's an HMO, then you've got about a 5-character alpha. It's BXQZG. It's all alpha characters, and so they're really easy to distinguish from each other. The HMO, as long as you're signed up for it, you'd still have to get the referral, right, from medical services. But there's routine on the HMO. You wouldn't think so, but yeah, there's routine vision benefits on the Aetna HMO policies. So yeah, there are times when you would want to take an HMO that you may not be aware of, but yeah.
Right. So we have it's not a question here, it's a comment actually from Gil Weber. So if you all know Gil from the site, he's a consultant who's been doing this honestly since many of us were in high school. I mean, he's been at this a long time, and he's got a huge amount of experience, and he happened to write this piece on the question box, which I've never seen anything like it. It's a gigantic paragraph, but what he's saying is kind of important, so I'm going to actually read it out now if you don't mind. So okay, here we go. So he's talking about late submission of claims and a plan's denial of responsibility to pay. He says, here we go. In more than half the states, there are provisions in their state laws that are practice-friendly and require plans to pay a clean but late submitted claim. These provisions fall under various names, But for example, in California, it's known as the notice prejudice rule. Whatever it may be named, the idea is that if a plan has a financial responsibility to pay a claim at, say, 90 days, the responsibility still exists at 91 days or thereafter, unless the plan can demonstrate that it would be prejudiced, i.e. hurt, by being forced to pay the otherwise valid claim. Plans would have a hard time proving that they would be prejudiced, i.e. hurt, if required to pay that late submitted but otherwise valid claim. So please check with your attorney or state society to see if your state has a provision generically termed, what is it, generically termed, hang on a second, let me scroll down here, I told you this was a novel, generically termed a notice prejudice rule. Do not just accept a plan statement that too bad, so sad, but your claim is submitted after the deadline and it's denied. So that is advice from Gil.
There you go. Okay. You know, I assume Gil is talking about filing a written appeal in that situation. You'd have to, I'm assuming that's how you'd notify the payer of this notice prejudice rule. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that's good if he's got the wherewithal to write those written appeals in those situations. It's good to know. That's really good information. The one tip I would throw in there when you're writing an appeal for this is, you know, having worked at an insurance company, I know how much they dislike complaints to the Board of Insurance. You know, it sent everyone at the insurance company in a tizzy. You know, it was like the McDonald's commercial when someone orders something without onions and everybody goes crazy trying to, it's out of the ordinary. Everybody goes crazy trying to solve this because it's so important to their ratings and it just affects them in many ways. So one of the things I'll do if I truly feel like I was wronged is to include a copy, not file it, but a copy of the complaint to the Department of Insurance, all filled out but not filed, and include that with my appeal and let them know that, you know, based upon their response, I'll be sending in the complaint. And so I found that to be highly effective in writing appeals. But that's good information about this notice prejudice rule. I'll have to try that.
Question here. It's an interesting question. So where can you find information on what Medicare is paying for procedures in your particular area?
What the fee schedule is?
Yep.
Yeah, the fee schedule. You know, we're back to, you know, you are have full rights to the terms of your contract with Medicare. And so, you know, now there are programs out there and people who calculate it. You know, there is a formula for it. RVBUs, and there's all these different values that differ by zip code. And so, you know, there is a way, a rather complicated way, to figure it out on your own. But, you know, really, you've got 10, 15 codes probably that you're billing. And so, one, you should be able to call the payer, whoever the payer is, and get the terms of your contract with them. And, you know, if that doesn't work, then, you know, if you're not billing enough, if you're getting paid everything you're billing, then you're not billing enough. And so you could, you know, raise your fee and until you're over the allowed amount. And you just got to do it consistently, of course. But, you know, for everybody, once you raise it. But, yeah, just don't do it on one person. You know, raise your fees. But, yeah, you can get them from the payer.
Yep. Okay, so question here, this is an interesting one. We're seeing a lot of unpredictability regarding copays. Sometimes they will not deduct the copay from our payment, and sometimes they will. Is it common for there to be an annual limit on the copay?
Well, it could be one of two things. Good question. And I would ask you if you see that with Aetna, if you maybe type the response in. But that's my guess, is that you're talking about Aetna. There are two ways that this would be. If someone has met, when you're calling for benefits or you're looking online, there's an out-of-pocket maximum. That's one of the fields there. You know, that is the maximum amount someone can pay before the insurance company pays everything. And so, if your out-of-pocket maximum's been met, and if they have, they need a hug because they've had a bad year. Because that out-of-pocket maximum is usually pretty high. But there are scenarios, somebody's had a catastrophic event, a car wreck or something, or a medical event, that they could have met that out-of-pocket maximum, and then that would cover the copay. But if you're seeing it that much, I would assume that it is not that, and it is just misunderstanding the benefits. So there are, that's one of the things that we do, is we teach people to interpret the benefits. One thing to pull them, another one to interpret them. And so when you're, there are some policies that if you don't bill an office visit with the diagnostic test, the copay doesn't apply. So, Aetna's one that I've found that does it more often than others. They all have them. United Healthcare policies have it. You'll see no copay applies when a physician's charge is not assessed. That's the verbiage you'll see on the website. No copay applies when a physician's charge is not assessed. If you pull the benefits of United Healthcare and you see that, if you bill the test out by itself and say, and it's the scenario, the use case here would be, they have vision insurance with a lower copay, and billing something that their medical insurance is going to increase their expense. And you have a diagnostic test that you want to bill. You could bill the routine to the vision plan and the medical to the diagnostic test to the medical plan, and it wouldn't hit the copay. So that would be the 2 times that I would be aware of something like that. But it is the distribution of your copay, the patient allowables between your deductible and copay and co-insurance. If you have your data, if you have control of your data and you can look at that ratio, then that will tell you really how effectively your staff is pulling your benefits. Deductibles should be, I would say, probably 30% or so of your patient allowables. And so if you get, you check your ratio and half of all your patient allowables were deductible, then you probably weren't getting good benefits for everyone to base their decision on.
Right. Gil writes back again, talking more about the notice prejudice rule, and I think, Gil, what we should do is maybe take this offline or put it online actually, and put it up on ODwire in a different discussion thread, because I think this is a really interesting topic. Gil starts citing Supreme Court cases, and this is information that I don't think a lot of people know. So I think this might be interesting. So Gil, if you're up to the task, why don't we table this here? We'll put it up on ODwire, and we'll start talking about this in a different thread, because I didn't know any of this. All about that rule and where it applies and where it might not. So thank you, Gil, for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thank you too. This is how you learn stuff. You talk to people who are out there, and no one knows everything. And so having good open discussions about the different regions, and just privy to different information. And so that's great. Thanks for bringing it up, and we'll check it out.
Yep. Okay. And I think we have time for two more questions. But the first one here is, how do you determine whether testing, like Fields or OCT, et cetera, apply to the deductible or not?
I like these types of questions, honestly, because they're the questions that a lot of people are asking themselves. They just are
right.
Maybe afraid to jump out there and ask it. So kudos to you for asking it. When I'm going to a practice and I'm talking to them and trying to educate them about how to interpret their benefits, it's on the deductible. A lot of people will look at a policy, and you don't become aware of this until till you see it happening. But there's a lot of times that the opposite of that happens. You don't go forward with the benefits or a diagnostic test as far as billing it out to the insurance company because you think there's a deductible and there's not. So it can go both ways. When you pull in the benefits, the deductible will be to either verbally communicated to you up front, along with the office out-of-pocket maximums and pre-existing conditions and all that kind of stuff. And online, of course, it's going to be on the beginning of the download, but it doesn't always apply. So and it often is a red herring. So what I'll tell the staff to do is to bypass that to begin with. I know that sounds probably crazy to some people and flies in the face of what they hold near and dear, but I instruct people to go look at the benefit first. So don't concern yourself with the deductible because it may not apply. And so go look at the terms of the policy for that particular service, whether it's surgical or routine vision or whatever it may be, labs, radiological for pachymetry. Go look at the benefit, see what it says, and in that benefit, if it says subject to deductible, then go check out the deductible. I've very rarely seen, I'm not going to say that it never, ever, ever, ever happens, but 99% of the time, if the deductible applies, it specifically states so. So if you've got something else going to deductible and you think you're pretty solid on the benefit that you pulled, there are other reasons for stuff to go to deductible other than you were wrong. It could be that for this particular insurance, you're supposed to bill with your individual MPI rather than the group MPI, and it processed out of network. There are different reasons why it could go to deductible. So it doesn't necessarily mean you interpreted it wrong. It might be that it was filed wrong. But look for the benefit first. If it's subject to deductible, then go look for the deductible. And surgical codes, 6s, Ponto plugs, they're going to be, and foreign bodies, they're going to be subject to that more often than diagnostic testing, the stuff with the 9s, any 9-9s or, visual fields, fundus photography, OCTs, all those tests, anything that starts with a 9. Oftentimes, the benefit description is exactly the same between those diagnostic tests and those surgical office surgery codes. The verbiage will read exactly the same, but at the end it'll say subject to deductible. And people will gloss over it. They see the same verbiage at the beginning and then they assume, naturally that they're the same. But on the surgical ones, those 6s, read through the whole thing and see if you don't see that at the bottom.
Right. And we're just about out of time, but I was holding this question back. My buddy Jeff here asked this towards the beginning. What the heck does Vision Web actually do?
Okay, thank you. It's a bit of an enigma to people. I've found that, working there sometimes, we think that because people know who we are, sometimes a lot of them don't know exactly what they do. So bless you for asking that question. We have this 3 main parts of Vision Web. First and foremost, there is an ordering platform that you can order your specs through. It connects to most PM systems, and here's the best part about it: it's free. It doesn't cost the practice anything. There's no kid catch here, no gotcha. There is no fee to the practice. The labs pay for it because they get clean electronic data. And so we interface like 450 labs in one interface. And it has intelligent ordering in the background. So if you order it from one lab and they don't have it, it'll kick it over and go get it from another place, and you may never even know it. It's got some really cool stuff there, but it lets you order from all these different labs with one interface, and will let you do so by downloading from your PM system, so you don't have data entry errors on your prescription. We have a PM system, Uprise, that is just emerging essentially, and it's great. It integrates a lot of the third-party systems that you would bolt on to other systems. It's just got direct connections with all those things, and so you don't have to pay separate fees for, for patient care, e-prescribing, that type of thing. And then you got what I do, which is insurance-related services. We really do 2 things. We have a clearinghouse offering, and so you can use that yourself. If you've got the right people and you want to do this, you handle your insurance services yourself, you can get that clearinghouse offering. It has the NCDs, LCDs, and CCIs. all those rules that say you can do this test but not that test, or this diagnosis drives this test. It has all those rules built into it so that when you file your claims, if it's wrong, it'll immediately kick back to you. So instead of going all the way through the payer and you're getting a denial or a rejection at the payer, it'll immediately, right then, instantaneously kick it back to you. So that's good unless you organize your data. So that's one thing we do. And then my revenue cycle management, or it was my unit revenue cycle management business. It's no longer. I've been in VisionWeb for 3 years now, and we do revenue cycle management for practices and corporations, quite frankly. And we've got a really nice offering. It's got really good reporting, and we're about twice as two and a half times faster than the industry average, which, by the way, is in the reporting. We have state and national averages in the reporting you can benchmark your practice against. So thank you for the question. Love you for that. And yeah, but that's what we do. The ordering, insurance, and a PM system.
Cool. All right. So that clarifies it. And so if anyone has more questions, I'm sure they can hit you up online and contact you that way. So we're out of time, but I see we still have a million more questions. So here's the deal, guys. When you go back to ODwire, there's a tab at the top of the page that says webinar. Click on it. The very first thread that comes up will be this webinar. We're going to be posting the archive of it right there. There's a discussion thread right underneath it. Feel free to go to that discussion thread and start posting your questions now. And what we can do is continue this conversation, indefinitely into the future. And the actual video archive of this talk is going to be up probably within the next day or two, but you can go start posting questions there right now. It's fully visible to everyone, and we can continue the conversation. So, Shane, thanks so much for being here, and I look forward to working with you again because I know we recruited you for CWire 2018.
Yeah, yes, absolutely, and it's an honor, and thank you, everyone, for coming. I know it's late, and I appreciate you making your way to it.
Great. Well, thanks so much, and I guess we'll catch up with everyone online. So have a great night, everyone.
Take care. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Adam.
Bye. Bye.